They said it was just a joke. That was the phrase everyone kept repeating later, when laughter curdled into discomfort and apologies came too late to matter. Just a joke. As if humiliation could be softened by intention. As if cruelty became harmless the moment it was wrapped in a smile. But in that moment, when the seating chart was revealed, when whispers rippled through the room like static before a storm, it didn't feel like a joke at all. It felt deliberate. Maya Thompson stood just inside the entrance of the downtown hotel ballroom, her fingers tightening around the strap of her purse as she scanned the space. Chandeliers glowed warmly overhead, casting light across linen-covered tables and polished glassware. Everything looked elegant, expensive, intentional. And yet, as her eyes found the small white place cards arranged with neat precision, a familiar knot formed in her stomach. She had almost not come. Single mothers learned quickly which invitations were genuine and which ones were obligations disguised as kindness. Office mixers, fundraisers, holiday dinners, events where people smiled too much and asked questions they had no right to ask. Maya had learned to navigate those spaces carefully, to keep answers short, her posture confident, her personal life firmly sealed away. Tonight was supposed to be different. The nonprofit she worked for, an education foundation partnered with several major donors, was hosting a joint appreciation dinner. Board members, sponsors, senior staff. Maya had spent weeks coordinating details behind the scenes, working late after putting her 9-year-old son Noah to bed. She had earned her place here. That was what she reminded herself as she walked further into the room. Her name card was near the center. Table 8. As she approached, the low murmur of conversation shifted. Someone noticed her. Then another. Laughter, quick, restrained, passed between people who believed they were being subtle. Maya slowed her steps. She saw the name beside hers before she reached the table. Ethan Cole. She blinked once, then twice. Of course. A few chairs away, a woman from donor relations leaned toward her neighbor, whispering behind her hand. Their shoulders shook with laughter. Someone else glanced over, eyebrows raised, lips curved in a knowing smirk. Maya didn't need to hear the words to understand them. Ethan Cole was the quiet one. The single dad who showed up exactly on time, left exactly on time, and never stayed for drinks. The man who worked in operations, a department people rarely noticed unless something went wrong. He dressed plainly, spoke rarely, and carried himself with the careful reserve of someone who preferred not to be seen. In other words, he was perfect. Perfect for a joke. Maya pulled out her chair and sat down slowly, her movements deliberate. If anyone expected her to react, laugh, sigh, roll her eyes, she refused to give them the satisfaction. She smoothed her dress, placed her purse at her feet, and looked straight ahead. Beside her, Ethan was already seated. He wore a dark blazer over a simple button-down shirt, no tie. His hands rested loosely on the table, fingers interlaced. He didn't look up when she sat down. If he noticed her arrival, he didn't show it. For a moment, Maya wondered if he'd seen the seating chart earlier. If he'd known this was coming. A man from the finance committee passed behind them and clapped Ethan lightly on the shoulder. "Hey man," he said loudly enough for half the table to hear. "Looks like you hit the jackpot tonight." A few people chuckled. Ethan nodded politely but didn't respond. Maya felt heat rise in her chest. Not embarrassment, she was long past that, but something sharper. Anger maybe. Or exhaustion. The kind that settled deep in her bones after years of being talked about like a problem to solve. She reached for the water glass in front of her and took a slow sip, buying herself time. Across the table, two women exchanged glances, clearly disappointed by the lack of reaction. The host took the microphone at the front of the room, tapping it twice. "Good evening, everyone. If you could all find your seats, we'll be starting shortly." As people settled, the whispers softened but didn't disappear. Maya could feel them like a low hum beneath the surface of everything else. "So," a voice said from across the table, bright and overly friendly. "Maya, right? I don't think we've officially met." Maya looked up. The woman smiled widely, her eyes sharp with curiosity. "Yes," Maya replied calmly. "Maya Thompson." The woman's smile widened. "I'm Claire. Isn't this fun? I mean, what are the odds?" She gestured vaguely between Maya and Ethan. Two single parents at the same table. "It's almost poetic." Maya held her gaze. "Is it?" Claire laughed, waving a hand. "Oh, you know what I mean. It's just nice when things work out." Ethan shifted slightly in his chair but said nothing. The first course arrived and conversation moved on. Mostly. Maya picked at her salad, listening to discussions about investment portfolios and vacation homes, nodding when appropriate. She contributed when the topic turned to the Foundation's upcoming programs, answering questions with clarity and confidence. A few people looked surprised. Maya noticed. Still, the undercurrent remained. Every so often, someone's eyes flicked toward Ethan, then back to her, as if they were waiting. For sparks. For discomfort. For confirmation that the joke was landing. Halfway through the meal, a man at the end of the table raised his glass. "I just want to say," he began, his voice carrying easily, "that this organization is like a family. We support each other. We connect people." He smiled, then added, "sometimes in unexpected ways." Laughter erupted. Maya felt her jaw tighten. She glanced sideways at Ethan, expecting, hoping, to see annoyance, discomfort, anything. But his expression remained neutral. Calm. Almost unreadable. She realized then that his stillness wasn't uncertainty. The second course came and went. Wine flowed more freely. People grew bolder. "So, Ethan," someone called out from a nearby table. "You and Maya should compare notes. Single parenting isn't easy, right?" Another voice chimed in. "Yeah, maybe you two can trade babysitting tips." Maya set her fork down carefully. "Actually," she said evenly, "I think we're both capable of managing our own lives." The table went quiet for a beat. Then someone laughed a little too loudly. "Oh, relax. We're just making conversation." Ethan finally looked at her. Their eyes met briefly and something passed between them. Recognition, perhaps. Understanding. He gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. Maya didn't know why that gesture steadied her, but it did. Still, the weight of the room pressed in. She felt suddenly very tired. She thought of Noah at home, probably reading in bed, waiting for her goodnight text. She thought of how many times she'd chosen silence over confrontation because it was easier. Tonight it felt heavier. When the plates were cleared and the host announced a short break before dessert, Maya pushed her chair back. She needed air. Space. Anything but this. She stood and murmured an excuse, slipping away from the table before anyone could stop her. As she walked toward the hallway outside the ballroom, she heard someone whisper her name, followed by a soft snicker. The corridor was quiet, cool. Maya leaned against the wall, closing her eyes. She pressed her lips together, willing herself not to cry. She hadn't cried over this kind of thing in years. She refused to start now. Footsteps approached. She opened her eyes to see Ethan standing a few feet away, hands in his pockets. "I hope it's okay that I followed you," he said quietly. Maya straightened. "It's fine." They stood in silence for a moment. "I'm sorry," he said finally. "About all of that." She shook her head. "It's not your fault." "I know," he replied. "But that doesn't make it right." She studied him, then really looked at him. There was something steady about the way he carried himself. No defensiveness. No self-pity. "They do this a lot," he continued. "Pair people up. Make assumptions. It's easier than seeing individuals." Maya let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. "You get used to it," she said. "Or you pretend to." He nodded. "Pretending only works for so long." Before she could respond, laughter spilled out into the hallway as the ballroom doors opened. A small group emerged, glasses in hand. "There you are," someone called. "We thought you'd disappeared." Another added, "Don't tell me you two are hiding already." Maya felt the familiar flush of anger rise again. Ethan stepped forward, his posture straightening. "We were just getting some air," he said calmly. "Well, come on back," the first man said. "Dessert's about to be served. Wouldn't want to miss the show." The group laughed and retreated. Maya looked at Ethan. "I think I'm going to leave." He considered this, then nodded. "I understand." They walked back toward the ballroom together, stopping just inside the doorway. Maya reached for her purse. "I should say goodbye to the host," she said automatically. "You don't owe anyone anything," Ethan replied gently. She paused, then smiled faintly. Old habits. As they returned to the table, conversations resumed, eyes tracking their movement. Someone leaned over and whispered something to Claire, who laughed softly. Maya sat down, her shoulders squared. Ethan took his seat beside her. The host tapped the microphone again. "Before dessert," he announced, "we have a special guest joining us tonight. Someone without whom many of our recent successes wouldn't have been possible." Maya barely listened at first. She was already mentally planning her exit. "And he's been here all evening," the host continued, "working quietly as he always does." A ripple of confusion moved through the room. The host smiled. "Please welcome Ethan Cole." The room froze. Maya's head snapped toward Ethan. He stood. Chairs scraped. Whispers exploded. Ethan adjusted his jacket and walked toward the front of the room, his steps measured, confident. He took the microphone from the host with a nod of thanks. "I don't usually speak at events like this," he began, his voice steady and clear. But tonight felt appropriate. The room was utterly the silence didn't break all at once. It fractured. A chair creaked somewhere near the back of the ballroom. A wine glass clinked softly against a plate. Someone inhaled sharply, as if only now remembering how to breathe. Maya remained seated, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Her pulse thundered in her ears so loudly she barely registered the murmurs spreading through the room. She kept her eyes fixed on Ethan, standing at the front beneath the warm chandelier light, the microphone resting easily in his hand. Coal Industries. Her mind raced, scrambling to connect pieces that suddenly seemed obvious in hindsight. The quiet confidence. The deliberate restraint. The way he never reacted to the jokes, never rushed to prove himself. He hadn't been invisible. He had been unbothered. Across the room, the host cleared his throat, visibly rattled. "Yes, well. Ethan has been instrumental in our expansion this year," he said, forcing a smile. "A generous partner and a single father," Ethan added calmly, not unkindly but firmly enough to cut through the noise. A few uncomfortable laughs fluttered and died. "Which, until tonight, seemed to be my most interesting qualification to some of you." The laughter stopped completely. Maya felt something loosen in her chest. Not relief, something stronger. Validation. Ethan continued, his voice steady but carrying weight now, the kind that demanded attention. "I don't usually address personal matters in professional spaces. But when personal lives are turned into public entertainment, silence starts to feel like permission." He glanced briefly toward Maya. The look wasn't possessive or performative. It was respectful. Grounded. "I came tonight to support this organization," he said, "and to observe. What I observed was disappointing." A woman from donor relations shifted in her chair, her smile gone. The man from finance stared down at his plate. Claire's face had gone pale, her lips pressed into a tight line. Ethan didn't single anyone out. He didn't need to. "I watched two capable professionals be reduced to a joke," he said evenly. "Not because of their work but because of their marital status. Because they didn't fit a narrative that made others comfortable." He paused, letting the words settle. "I've spent years building a company that values discretion, integrity, and respect," he continued. "Tonight reminded me how rare those qualities can be, even in rooms full of people who believe themselves progressive." Maya swallowed hard. She felt exposed, but not in the way she had earlier. This was different. This was someone standing beside her without asking for anything in return. The host attempted a chuckle. "Well, I'm sure no harm was meant." "Harm doesn't require intent," Ethan replied smoothly. "Only impact." The room stayed silent. Ethan handed the microphone back to the host. "Thank you for having me." He turned and walked back toward the tables. Every step felt like a shift in gravity. People watched him pass as if seeing him for the first time. Some looked stunned. Others embarrassed. A few, calculating. When he reached the table, Maya stood without thinking. Their eyes met again. "Are you okay?" he asked quietly. She nodded, though her throat felt tight. I think I am now." They sat. The room buzzed with restrained energy, conversations restarting in hushed tones. Dessert plates arrived, untouched. No one seemed interested in sweets anymore. Claire leaned toward Maya, her earlier confidence replaced with forced politeness. "I had no idea," she said quickly. "If I'd known who Ethan was." Maya met her gaze. "That's the point." Claire flushed and leaned back, saying nothing more. Across the table, the man from finance cleared his throat. "Ethan," he began, attempting a laugh. "Guess we underestimated you." Ethan looked at him calmly. "You underestimated yourselves," he replied. "You assumed kindness was weakness." The man's smile faltered. Maya felt a strange calm settle over her. For the first time all evening, she wasn't bracing for the next comment. The power had shifted and everyone could feel it. But with that shift came something else. Attention. People began stopping by the table. Board members, donors, executives. Each one suddenly eager to introduce themselves to Ethan properly, to apologize, to explain. Maya watched the performance with detached clarity. She'd seen this before, how quickly respect followed status. Ethan handled it with polite efficiency, offering brief responses, redirecting conversations back to the organization, never boasting. Eventually he leaned toward Maya. "Would you like to leave?" She considered it. By Monday morning, the story had already evolved. It always did. Maya could feel it the moment she stepped into the building. The air was different, thicker, charged with the kind of attention that didn't need words. Conversations paused as she passed. Heads turned. People smiled too quickly or looked away too slowly. The joke had died. In its place was something far more dangerous. Curiosity. She reached her desk, set down her bag, and powered on her computer as if nothing had changed. Years of navigating corporate spaces as a single mother had taught her one essential skill: composure. Whatever they thought they knew now, she would not be the one to confirm it. Her inbox flooded within minutes. Great job handling yourself Friday. Didn't realize you were so close to Ethan Cole. Wild night, huh? She deleted most without responding. Across the open floor, Ethan's desk sat exactly where it always had, near the operations team, half hidden by filing cabinets and printer stations. Except now it wasn't hidden at all. Two senior managers hovered nearby, pretending to discuss logistics while clearly waiting for him to arrive. Maya took a breath and focused on her screen. At 8:57 a.m. Ethan walked in. Same pace. Same posture. Same quiet presence. But the office reacted as if a spotlight had switched on. People straightened. Smiles appeared. One manager rushed forward, hand extended. Ethan. Glad you're in early. I'm always in early, Ethan replied calmly, shaking his hand. Maya watched from the corner of her eye as a small crowd formed. Compliments were paid. Invitations extended. Coffee offered. He declined most with polite efficiency and sat at his desk, opening his laptop as if this were any other morning. Maya admired that. An hour later, her phone buzzed. Ethan, conference room B at 10. You might want to be there. Her fingers hovered over the screen. What? She typed. The response came quickly. Ethan, trust me. Maya exhaled slowly. Conference room B was already half full when she arrived. Department heads lined the table. The executive director sat at the head, his expression unusually tight. Claire was there too, sitting rigidly, hands folded in her lap. Ethan stood near the whiteboard, arms relaxed at his sides. When Maya entered, several heads turned. The director cleared his throat. Thank you all for coming on short notice, he said. Given recent developments, it seemed appropriate to address a few things. Maya took an empty seat near the end of the table. This organization prides itself on inclusivity and respect, he continued. Friday night revealed gaps between our values and our behavior. No one spoke. Ethan stepped forward then, but instead of taking the floor, he gestured toward Maya. Before we continue, he said, I'd like Maya Thompson to speak. Maya's heart skipped. Every eye swung toward her. She hadn't prepared for this. Hadn't planned a speech. Hadn't even considered that her voice might be required now. But something in Ethan's steady gaze grounded her. She stood. I didn't come here to make a statement, she began, her voice calm despite the pounding in her chest. I came to do my job. The same job I've done well for years. She paused, letting the silence work for her. What happened Friday wasn't about matchmaking, she continued. It was about control. About deciding who deserves dignity and who can be laughed at. Claire shifted uncomfortably. I've learned to tolerate a lot in the name of professionalism, Maya said. But tolerance isn't respect. And silence isn't consent. The room stayed quiet. I don't want The backlash didn't arrive loudly. It crept in through closed-door meetings, delayed approvals, and subtle exclusions. The kinds of resistance that never appeared in official reports but were felt everywhere else. Maya recognized it immediately. It was the corporate version of punishment without fingerprints. Her proposal for a new outreach program stalled in review. A meeting she usually led was reassigned, temporarily. An invitation to a donor luncheon never reached her calendar. Nothing blatant. Nothing she could formally challenge. But it was happening. She sat at her desk late one evening, the office nearly empty, staring at an email thread that had looped around her 3 times without including her once. Her jaw tightened. 3 weeks ago she would have swallowed it. Told herself it wasn't worth the trouble. Now she felt something else rising beneath the frustration. Resolve. Her phone vibrated. Ethan, still there? She glanced at the clock. 7:42 p.m. Maya, yeah. Just wrapping up. Pause. Ethan, I'm downstairs. Her heart skipped, surprised. Downstairs? She typed. Ethan, lobby. No rush. She shut down her computer and gathered her things, the tension in her shoulders easing slightly as she took the elevator down. Ethan stood near the glass doors, jacket over one arm, talking quietly with the security guard. When he saw her, he nodded and stepped aside. "Everything okay?" she asked as they walked outside. "Depends," he said. "How honest do you feel like being?" She smiled tiredly. "Very." They walked a block in silence before she spoke. "They're freezing me out," she admitted. Carefully. Smartly. He nodded. "I expected that." "You did?" "Yes." The auditorium was full. Not politely full, the way meetings often were, with half-attentive bodies scrolling on phones. This was different. Every seat was occupied. Latecomers stood along the walls. Camera crews adjusted their angles. Donors whispered to one another, programs folded neatly in their laps. Maya stood backstage, the low murmur of the crowd vibrating through the floor beneath her feet. She clasped her hands together and breathed in slowly. This was not fear, she realized. It was gravity. The weight of being seen. A stagehand peeked around the curtain. 2 minutes. Maya nodded. She thought of Noah that morning, sitting at the kitchen table with his cereal, asking if she was nervous. She had told him the truth. "Yes," she'd said. "But nervous doesn't mean wrong." Ethan stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, watching the stage lights. He didn't offer advice. He didn't offer reassurance. He didn't need to. "You're ready?" he said quietly. She looked at him, really looked at him, and nodded once. The host's voice echoed through the auditorium. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. We are proud to introduce the Director of Community Strategy for our newest initiative, a program built not on assumptions but on lived experience." Applause rose, polite but curious. Maya Thompson. The lights shifted. Maya stepped onto the stage. The applause grew louder as she crossed to the podium. She adjusted the microphone slightly and looked out over the audience. For a moment the room blurred. Then she found her center. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she began. The room stilled. "Not because I lack qualifications," she continued calmly, "but because people like me are often expected to stay grateful, quiet, and unseen." A few heads lifted. "I'm a single mother," she said. "And for a long time, that was the most interesting thing people thought about me. Not my work. Not my ideas. Just my circumstances." She paused. "That ends today." The audience leaned in. Maya spoke without notes, her words steady, precise. She spoke about structural barriers. About talent overlooked because it didn't look impressive enough on paper. About parents forced to choose between survival and ambition. She spoke about dignity. "This initiative exists because respect should not depend on proximity to power," she said. "It should be inherent." Applause erupted, real this time. Sustained. Maya finished to a standing ovation. Backstage the energy was electric. Board members shook her hand. Donors praised her vision. Reporters waited with questions. Across the room she saw Greg standing near the exit, his expression tight, applause half-hearted. For the first time he looked small. Irrelevant. Later, as the crowd thinned, the executive director approached her. "You changed the room," he said quietly. Maya smiled. No. The room was always capable of change. Outside the evening air was cool. Maya and Ethan stood side by side on the steps, the city stretching out before them. "You did more than present," Ethan said. "You reset the standard." She looked at him. "You could have stopped them sooner." "Yes," he agreed. "But then it would have been my voice. Not yours." She understood then. This had never been about rescue. It had been about recognition. They stood in comfortable silence. Finally Maya spoke. "They sent me to sit beside you as a joke." Ethan smiled faintly. "And learned the cost of underestimating both of us." She laughed softly, the sound light, unburdened. For the first time in a long time, Maya felt something solid beneath her feet. Not luck, not approval, but self-trust. Justice hadn't arrived loudly. It had arrived clearly. And it had stayed.